College football nerds here talking James Franklin being let go at Penn State. You'll notice that Josh is not with me. He is on his second leg of his monster vacation and he won't be around this week. But I've got some special guests for y'all that you're going to love, that you know, that are familiar to you coming up in the previews this week. So when you see the thumbnail, don't think it's just me trying to carry it by myself. All right, I want to talk about this real quick. And Penn State fans, I think you're going to appreciate this. I've been really frustrated about the narrative around James Franklin's firing, and even people who, like my boy Josh Pate, I love him to death. We agree on almost everything, but on this one we disagree. On this one, the narrative is, who are they going to get that's better? What if they get somebody that's worse? And to me, I hear a lot of this, and what I hear is, who is Penn State to think they can do better? Y'all, I don't know if people realize this or not, but Penn State is a blue blood. Penn State doesn't have a recent national championship, but a lot of teams don't have a recent national championship. Until Georgia won a couple of years ago, they didn't have one since like 1980. So I think it's, when we look at these programs and what they put into a program, what they put into from a fan expectation, from a money expectation, Penn State is up there. And they have not achieved under James Franklin what their expectations are. And it's almost like Ohio State fans or Alabama fans or people who expect Penn State to be a certain thing want them to stay that certain thing. And they're almost indignant about the fact that Penn State is trying to improve their station. In an NIL era, when Penn State can afford to spend with the big boys and they've got the TV contracts and they got the donor base, why not shoot for more? And so the frustrating thing for me is I hear this and I think, okay, we're teaching young men as student athletes to strive for their best, to put everything out there in 2 days in the summer, to try to win at the highest level, but we're not going to have the same expectations as an administration around us. We just throw our hands up and accept that, and I don't accept that for Penn State. I don't accept that any program has to say we can't do better than this. This station where we're at a nice 10-2, we're not threatening anybody that matters, is who we're going to be. I don't accept that. Alabama and Georgia recently, modern football, had this same thing happen. I distinctly remember the talking heads saying, who does Alabama think they're going to get better than Mike Shula? A guy that came there during probation, a guy that played at Alabama. Who are they going to get that's better than him? Who are they going to get that's better than Mark Richt? Had a massive winning percentage, won an SEC championship, took Georgia higher than they had been in a decade before that. Who are they going to get that's better? Well, what if they felt like that this is our station? This is where we're going to be, and we might get worse, so let's not risk it. That's the other thing that's interesting about this, is we always talk about, well, what if they get somebody that's worse? First of all, worse than not ever winning a championship is I guess, at some level worse. But knowing that you're never going to win a championship with the guy you have is a lot worse to me than taking a shot with somebody that might. So we look at, I've heard a lot of examples of like Auburn and Nebraska, and that's without consideration the fact that Auburn absolutely might have even been worse than they were under Harsin if they kept Gus Malzahn. He was lazy, not as lazy as Harsin, but he was lazy in the recruiting trail. He hadn't recruited any offensive linemen in years, worth of crap. He had gotten stale as an offensive coach, as an offensive mind. And once you start losing recruiting momentum, it's a death nail for your program. And it is hard to retain or get back that momentum, because obviously now it's a little different because teams can spin their way out of it. But players, when they grow up in a certain era and they know who you are and you start to decline from that, it's hard to get it back. And so Penn State might step back, and they might step back a little bit and step forward. They might get some new blood in there. That program was a quarterback away for 10 years. They had a quarterback on the bench last year better than the guy they started last year and this year. That's a fact. They had a better quarterback, and maybe it's the system. Maybe it's, that's also coaching. Not evaluating quarterback talent is coaching. And so, yes, I think he needed to go. I think he needed to go because I think Penn State expects more for their program, and they should. How dare they expect this for their program? They should. The number one takeaway I want you to leave this video with is Penn State is allowed to want more for their program. James Franklin was known as the guy who's never going to win the big game, but never going to lose the bad game, which is an interesting take because he was extended in 2021, given an $80 million contract, a 10-year contract with a massive buyout, fully guaranteed up front, after going 4-5 in 2020, and then he was in the middle of a 7-6 year in 2021. So you have not only some ridiculous decisions being made by these athletic departments, which I'll get to in a second, but also some history with James Franklin where he wasn't elite. And that everybody says he saved that program after the Sandusky stuff, but that program was on an upward trajectory before he got there. So, they lost a coach because he was doing well there and James Franklin replaced him. And so I don't agree that James Franklin was guaranteed to always win the big game or the games he should, because we've seen that this year with James Franklin 3 in a row. They have 3 losses. They have yet to beat a Power 4 team. It's week 8, and they have the 104th toughest schedule in the nation. Remember, they didn't play a Power 4 team out of conference. So if you have that situation, you see this downward trajectory, you got to do something. And look, I get it. Last year was a good year, but we as fans have the luxury of just looking at the win-loss or just looking at how close we were to winning another playoff game or being in the playoffs at all. But people who are making these decisions in athletic departments have to look at this with a little more of a critical eye and see that the reason Penn State won those playoff games is probably because of the ridiculous seeding situation that they fell into last year. So some teams had an easier path from the jump because of how things had to be seeded in the playoffs. And so if you look at the teams he beat, were they great? Were they big games? Would you lose those games 9 times out of 10 if you had that roster versus an SMU roster? I don't think so. Yes, he won those games. He deserves credit, but that's not the standard. The standard is, making deep runs in the playoffs. But if those deep runs in the playoffs are made against teams that suck and you still don't win the big games like the Big Ten Championship or when you play Ohio State or when you play Michigan when they're good, those things matter. And so you have to look beyond, just like people accuse us of just box score watching, which we don't, we watch every game. Those things matter. You have to look deep into what's going on and decide, okay, what's the real scenario of this season? And are we building towards something great? Or are we regressing or getting into a situation where we're never going to be elite? And Penn State was never going to be elite under James Franklin. So good on Penn State. It's an expensive mistake that was made in 2021. It's not an expensive mistake now. It's more expensive if you ride this out. And going back to the Gus Malzahn point, we always talk about what if they get worse, but we never go back and revisit coaches that should have been fired 2, 3, 4 years before they were finally fired and how much that costs universities. There's an opportunity cost here that might be bigger than $50 million. And they can do it now and kind of rip the Band-Aid and right the wrong that they made 4 years ago versus riding this out, letting recruiting die, and having to overpay for recruiting classes and in the transfer portal because of the trajectory of the program. Those are real dollars as well. And so I think that we need to also consider the fact that if they stuck with James Franklin and they had another year like this or 2 more years like this, because of that albatross of $50 million that they're worried about, what is that? How do you reconcile that against making the decision now? Because they've got TV money, they've got plenty of booster money, they got fan support. They didn't want to lose any of that momentum by another year of James Franklin. And by the way, this year's not over. You think it's bad for recruiting now. They've already lost a 5-star recruit today, I saw. You think it's bad now. What's it going to be if he goes 4-8 this year? Do you fire him at the end of the year? That's the other thing that people don't realize. There's a first mover advantage in the coaching space, especially in college football, because there are a lot of good coaches who are looking for another job or a better job that if someone, the first good teams that let their coach go or good programs that let their coach go, they're in a tremendous advantage versus trying to find a coach in January or in December. And they understand that. But one I will warn against is Matt Rule, and that's a name that's been bouncing around a lot. They're 5-1 in Nebraska right now. But just like I asked you to look beyond the win-loss totals in the playoff run last year for Penn State, I ask you to look at Nebraska's schedule right now, who they've beaten, who they lost to, how close those games were, and the wins against not so great teams. There is a situation this year where Nebraska goes 10-2, 11-1, has a lot of heat around Matt Rule, a lot of heat around that program. They might even make the playoffs, and they are, in my opinion, probably a complete pretender. And if I know he's got ties to Penn State, and I know he's right now a sexy name. That one would be, to me, out of the frying pan into the fire situation. So just keep an eye on that. Y'all, Penn State fans have been really critical of us for the last few years. And I hope that with what has transpired over the last couple of years with Penn State, especially with Drew Aller and this program in general, that they appreciate the fact that we were never Penn State haters, ever. That's a program that Josh actually has some family ties to. That's a program that I have always had a tremendous amount of respect, and I defend them as a blue blood. That is a program that if we kissed your butt every week, we would do much better numbers because it's a massive program. But we are nothing if not honest, sometimes overly critical, but it's not because we hate your team. It's because we expect greatness out of Penn State. And so we're going to pick you apart. We're not going to treat you like we might treat Vanderbilt. And that's not what you want, right? So I hope that we've earned a little bit of appreciation and respect from Penn State fans in this over the last couple of years, in that we were just being honest. We are not being critical. We don't hate your team. I actually think, I know people say this and it's kind of corny, and I don't always agree. I do think college football is better if Penn State is good. I think college football is better because that's a team that has consistent fan support. Big Ten needs another elite team in that conference, and so from that standpoint, I'm pulling for Penn State. I'm pulling for them to make the right hire, but that's not gonna doesn't mean that we're not gonna always keep it honest with y'all. We love y'all. We hope that we haven't burned bridges with y'all in the past by, honestly, I hate to say it, by keeping it real. So let us know in the comments what you think, one, about Matt Rule, and two, whether or not you think Penn State needed to make this firing right now, or they should have waited out another year or two. Let us know. Keep an eye out for the previews. Thanks so much. Have a great week, and God bless.